let's start with the debate. You and your team have said you had a bad night, but your friend Nancy Pelosi actually framed the question that I think is on the minds of millions of Americans. Was this a bad episode or the sign of a more serious condition?
It's a bad episode. No indication of any serious condition. I was exhausted. I didn't listen to my instincts in terms of preparing, and a bad night.
You know, you say you were exhausted, and I know you said that before as well, but you came, and you did have a tough month, but you came home from Europe about 11 or 12 days before the debate, spent 6 days in Camp David. Why wasn't that enough rest time, enough recovery time?
Because I was sick. I was feeling terrible. Matter of fact, the docs with me, I asked them, they did a COVID test because they were trying to figure out what was wrong. They did a test to see whether or not I had some infection, a virus. I didn't. They just had a really bad cold.
And did you ever watch the debate afterwards?
I don't think I did, no.
Well, what I want to get at is, what were you experiencing as you were going through the debate? Did you know how badly it was going?
Yeah, look, the whole way I prepared, nobody's fault mine. Nobody's fault but mine. I prepared what I usually would do, sitting down, as I did come back with foreign leaders or the National Security Council, for explicit detail. And I realized about partway through that, I get quoted, the New York Times had me down at 10 points before the debate, 9 now, or whatever the hell it is. The fact of the matter is that what I looked at is that he also lied 28 times. The way the debate ran, not my fault, no one else's fault. No one else's fault.
But it seemed like you were having trouble from the first question in, even before he spoke.
Well, I just had a bad night.
And that is just a clip of what we just witnessed on ABC television, the network. It just aired it moments ago here in Dallas and across the country with George Stephanopoulos. That's Stephanopoulos on the campaign trail with Joe Biden, President Joe Biden. And the interview started with, first and foremost, Westside Jeff is my name, in for Chris Krok. Chris is back Monday. Joining me in studio is Bob Clegg. Bob is a senior Republican strategist that does campaigns across the country. I've had Bob on many, many times. He's done several campaigns, including, I think, originally Governor Abbott's campaign here in the state of Texas when he ran for Attorney General.
Yeah.
So I'm going to open the phone lines tonight to get your perspective on what you heard. What did you think about what you heard? What's your opinion? Did it help your cause? Did it hurt your cause? How do you feel about what you just saw or heard? If you want to weigh in, you can hit me up across social media at Westside Jeff on X, formerly known as Twitter. Also on Facebook, but the phone number 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP. A couple things, my immediate thoughts. Number one, I went into this tonight thinking this wouldn't be that big of a deal. There's nothing Joe Biden could have said tonight to change my mind that he has mental acuity and capability to run for president of the United States. Number one. But before that, I just didn't go into it believing that a journalist by the name of Stephanopoulos would be forthright and honest and ask tough questions. And you know what? The winner to me tonight is Stephanopoulos. Stephanopoulos, I think, did a great job. It started with him saying out of the get-go, we sat down for 22 minutes with President Joe Biden. This is unedited. We did not touch it. We did not stop it. We went straight through. I appreciate that. If that's true, if the full visibility of Stephanopoulos telling us that, if that's true and accurate, I applaud George Stephanopoulos.
Jeff, don't applaud George Stephanopoulos.
I know.
If Joe Biden was up by 7 or 8 points, he would never have. He would have been still part of the press covering up all of this for the last 5 years. Yeah. And he has been an active. I saw the footage from last year when Nikki Haley brought this subject matter up to him, and he attacked her. He was brutal to her.
Stephanopoulos?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, he's part of it all. He wants he hates the bad orange man.
He's part of the public relations machine.
He is playing this so that he can get rid of Joe Biden. That's the only reason he did the interview and the only reason the way he did it.
Stephanopoulos?
Yes.
See, I got to wonder if Stephanopoulos did this to save his job.
Well, he's trying to save face because
ABC went to him and said, "You're the guy."
He got caught, like all of them.
Absolutely.
They got caught, and now they're trying to cover their butts.
Explain what you mean. I know what you mean, but explain what you mean.
Oh, they've known this for years. They played along with the campaigning from the basement back in 2020, using COVID as a.
COVID came up tonight. We'll talk about that in 2 minutes.
COVID as a cover for not having him go out and do speeches.
So
like
you're saying
candidates.
You're saying what I've said all along, and that is the media is to blame for all this because the media has been covering up for Joe.
The worst player in all this is the Democrat Party, because they're the ones that have started this and have kept it going for the last 5 years. But the media was a more than willing participant to help them out in doing this big lie to the American people.
Well, I still think bravo to Stephanopoulos. He asked tough questions. Again, if it's unedited, I got to trust that. I got to believe in that. And out of the get-go, my interpretation... it was never going to change my mind, ever. Nothing could happen tonight that would change my mind. So I was a kind of a backseat viewer of this. I wasn't rushing to the TV to watch this thing because I just knew it wasn't going to make an impact for me. But I ask you as a listener, did tonight impact anything? I think now that it's done, I'll get into it in about 6 minutes because I get a break in a few minutes, but I believe it did more damage than good for the Democratic Party. Here's what I heard. That was the audio you heard out of the get-go, and this is where I wish we had the ability. Unfortunately, radio being live, this is live radio is what it is. I wish I had the ability to more time than 20 or 30 minutes to cut up the audio and play all this so that you could hear all of it and I could frame it. But what I did hear is a couple things. The first thing is Joe Biden had an excuse. He said, I had a bad night. The second thing I wrote down is Stephanopoulos asked him about has he seen a doctor, and Joe Biden said doctors did a COVID test thinking something was wrong. Isn't that interesting? He's throwing COVID around because he got elected because of COVID in the first place, and he's bringing up COVID again. The third thing Stephanopoulos did is, and this is the most telling point to me of the entire night, the most telling. Stephanopoulos said, kept pressing, it was a bad night, and you didn't perform very well. Stephanopoulos said, did you watch the debate? And Joe Biden's answer was, I don't think so, no. Now, that's bad. That's when I was out. I'm like, okay, I'm done. That just confirmed what I believe, and that is there's nothing Joe Biden could say to turn my mind around. Because my take on that is two things. Number one, you're president of the United States. This is the biggest story of your lifetime, the biggest story across the world that is impacting the world. And you were just asked, did you watch the debate? And his answer is, quote, he said, I don't think so, period. No. Now, either you did watch it or you didn't watch it. And if he doesn't know that he watched it or not watched it, that's a problem.
He knew.
Absolutely.
But it's so bad. He didn't want to admit that he actually watched it.
Yeah.
They showed him bits and pieces. They went over it. They told him what he did good, what he did bad. I mean, he did, but he doesn't want to admit that. That's all he's doing. It's not like he had a senior moment or anything.
And he followed up on the heels of that answer, turning the answer around and saying Trump lied 28 times. Now, wait a minute. You just told me I don't think I watched the debate. No. Now, either you did and you just lied, or you don't remember that you did, and for either answer is why people shouldn't vote for you.
I pick he's a liar.
I picked both. That's Bob Clegg. Bob is a political strategist. He's a senior political analyst and advisor. He does political campaigns for Republicans across the country and many states, including right here in Texas. We've got some strong opinions of this. I'm Westside Jeff and for Chris Krok. We're going to talk about this. I want to hear from you and your opinion. What did you think? How did that make you feel about tonight's interview with Stephanopoulos and Biden? My name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. Jeff in for Chris Krok on News Talk 820 WBAP and now on FM at 93.3. Jeff is the name. Westside Jeff in for Chris Krok. Chris is back on Monday. Joining me here in studio, Bob Clegg. Bob is a senior political analyst and strategist. He does political campaigns for Republicans across the country, including he's done several here in Texas. One of them he did a few years back was current Governor Greg Abbott when he ran for Attorney General. So, Bob, thank you for joining me in the studio.
Pleasure, Jeff.
Tonight has been billed as kind of the bailout of Joe Biden. The Democrats and the Democratic Party, the re-election campaign. I think tonight's, and it just finished, I think tonight's interview was really targeted for a couple things. And Bob, you can talk a little bit about this because you know this very well. There has to be a clear divide between the office of the president and the campaign re-election committee. There's, for those who don't get granular inside of politics, you cannot have the KJP, who is the spokesperson for the office of the president. She can't be involved in the re-election side. So they've got to keep two different teams. One team for the White House, for the quote-unquote president of the United States, and a separate, completely different team up and down through everything they do for the re-election campaign. They can talk a little bit back and forth, but they got to be very careful, and that's where politics comes into play. This was purely, they built it as a conversation with the president, but this was all about the re-election. And this was trying to remake the product and re-image. I talked about this last night. A lot of products get damaged, and marketing types try to reinvent them and try to fix them. I've given several examples. I remember Subway years ago was failing, and they came out with that whole $5 footlong, which reinvigorated Subway. That re-energized them. I've seen many companies do that over years. Some failed, some haven't. Tonight, that's how it was. This is a product, and the product is President Joe Biden, his re-election campaign. They're trying to remake it, and they're trying to reimagine it and fix it. I think they did more damage tonight than they did good. George Stephanopoulos was on the trail with Joe Biden. He did the interview. It was a 22-minute interview. Stephanopoulos set it up in advance and said there were no edits. He went straight through. And asked him tough questions. And I appreciate that out of Stephanopoulos. And Biden he did a crummy job. I got to keep my four-letter words away from it.
Biden did Biden. I mean, why are we acting like this is all new and different? This is the way it's been for the last 4 years. And nothing's changed.
And it comes back to something you and I've talked about all along, Bob, and that is I blame the media for this. The media have seen this. They knew this 4 years ago, and they've covered it up for him. They have been the public relations arm of this administration.
Jeff, the only thing that's different, he's losing. That's the only thing that's different.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for that, we would be just happily, merrily going along like we have for the last 4 years.
800-288-9227 is our phone number. How did you feel about what you saw and what you heard tonight from Joe Biden? What's your perspective? Do you think Joe Biden steps down? Does he not? Let's talk about that, Bob. Let's talk about your political...
I hope he doesn't. I'm not an idiot.
Being a Republican strategist.
Yeah, I hope he stays in there.
Joe. You look great.
But, it really doesn't matter because, I mean, and we, I don't know if you want to talk about it, but a new poll came out today, Harris poll. Biden's down by 4. Kamala Harris is down by 7. And that's their dilemma. They don't have a good option number 2 here.
So let me ask you this. Let's go into that conversation. If they had a good option number 2.
Oh, he wouldn't be the nominee as we're speaking tonight. He'd be gone. In
your opinion, who's keeping him the nominee?
Kamala Harris. They don't have, she's not strong enough to be a winner, and they know that. I mean, they do polling. I mean, the Democrats are.
They know polling better than we know polling.
Yeah, they do tons of polling. If she looked like she was going to be a strong opponent to Donald Trump, she would already be the nominee. They know she isn't, and they don't know what to do. They're stuck because they know they can't. Number one, they can't get rid of Biden right now. They still aren't able to get rid of him. And number two, there's no way they can jump over her. So they're basically thinking, well, should we stay with Biden? Should we go with her? It doesn't really matter because they both are going to lose. So they don't know what to do. I mean, that's why you have this lull here where you got people talking back and forth, but nothing's really happening.
Another key moment for me tonight, and I wish I could pull out audio, but I can't. So it's because it just happened. But Stephanopoulos, I don't know, about 8 or 10 minutes into it, said, he talked about polling, talked about all the talk around the country, no matter what network you're listening to. And Stephanopoulos said, how are you going to turn the campaign around? And Biden said, we're turning it around. Have you seen the crowd at my rallies? And Stephanopoulos had a weird look on his face and said, Mr. President, I don't think you want to play the crowd game. That just goes to show you how.
I wouldn't either. I wouldn't want to play that game either.
That just goes to show you, Bob, how out of touch he is.
Well, no, that you can call that being out of touch, but it's also typical Joe Biden with a gigantic ego. And I mean, they talk about President Trump and his ego. Biden's got a gigantic ego. He would not want to admit that he has smaller crowds.
Stephanopoulos followed that comment up, by the way. I couldn't write quick enough, so pardon my if it's not exact word for word, but Stephanopoulos said, Mr. President, I've never seen a president with 36 approval rating get reelected. And Biden said, those aren't my numbers. I don't believe them.
Yeah. Well, of course, no candidate ever believes their numbers. And they also use that, the only poll that matters to me is on Election Day. Those are typical political things. You're never going to get a candidate admit, I'm really behind and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to beat them. I mean, it just doesn't happen.
There are three. I'm Westside Jeff. That's Bob Clegg. And I want to open the phones and get your perspective on what you heard, what you thought, how you feel about how it's going to impact, how you feel it's going to impact this race. The phone number is 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP. You can hit me up also across social media at Westside Jeff. Got to hit bottom of the hour news. Lori Waffen-Schmidt in the newsroom. She's been cutting up audio and has some recap on some of this. She's going to have that in about 2 minutes. On the other side of the news, I'm going to tell you that the whole Biden, does he drop, does he not, and what happens, it comes down to there are really three things impacting what Joe Biden does in this race. I'll frame it to you in about 6 minutes. That's Bob Clegg. He's a Republican strategist across the country. He handles a lot of races. I'm Jeff, Westside Jeff, in for Chris Krok. Coming up in 2 minutes is the news with Lori Waffen-Schmidt. You're listening to News Talk 820 WBAP and now on FM at 93.3. So the Stephanopoulos Biden interview just occurred a little while ago. And I wish I had the time to sit down and go through it and cut up all the audio and play audio parts, but I don't. So bear with me. I took as many. I wish I knew shorthand, man. I don't know shorthand, so I scribbled notes as quick as I could. Bob Clegg is joining me. I'm Westside Jeff is my name. Bob Clegg is a Republican strategist. He does a lot of campaigns. He strategizes. He also has a fundraising arm to his business, and that plays a big part of what's going on with Joe Biden. I mentioned a moment ago, there really are three constituencies for the Joe Biden re-election campaign. There's three constituencies, three audiences, three very distinct. When you think about a product and marketing, you got to think about your target audience, and you've got to sell your product to that target audience. And that's how I'm looking at this campaign. Joe Biden is a product, and they're trying to sell Joe Biden as a product to the American people aren't buying it. We, good conservatives, didn't buy it in the first place, but Democrats aren't buying it. And they've got three audiences. You got to remember everything the Democrats are doing, and that's why they went to Stephanopoulos on this. They've got three key audiences. So when you break down tonight's interview and you go back and listen to some of it, I want you to keep this in mind. Three constituencies. Number one is polling. In no particular order. Polling is very important because if the American people, and I'm talking about Democratic voters, reject Joe Biden, they're done. That's it. It comes down to they want to know that they've got persuadable voters, people who will say, yes, I will vote for Joe Biden. So one constituency is voters, and that's polling. Number two are donors. And if polling is good and they can go to donors, people who write big checks, and put polling in front of them and say, here's what the polls say, then donors are willing to invest their money in it. No different than you and I in stocks, right? You got money in your pocket. You're going to give it to a financial advisor. You want to give money to a stock, to a fund that you think is going to grow 20% versus one that's going to grow 5%. You want something returned on your money. Well, donors want the same thing. If donors perceive polling sucks and Joe Biden has no path to win, they're not writing checks. And that was this. You've seen signs of that, and it's been going all along. But there was tales of that last night, about 24 hours ago, as the heiress for Disney came out and said she will not donate money to the political party until Joe Biden steps aside. When Disney, Abigail Disney, comes out and says, I'm not giving money to the Democratic Party until he steps aside, and a couple others have followed, that's a problem. Donors are huge constituency. And the third constituency with the Biden re-election campaign is support on Capitol Hill. That's the third element of this. So they are in full-fledged panic, and they're trying to win any of those three constituencies. Polling, which is voters, donors, which is money, and support on Capitol Hill, which are congressional members, and they're losing all three. And tonight, I don't think did anything to help their cause. I'd love to hear from you as a listener. What do you think? How do you feel about this? Do you think Biden helped his cause or not? Do you think Joe stays in the race or gets out? And what do they do? This is no different than you and I buying a home, selling a home. You don't put your home up for sale without knowing you're going somewhere. The Bidens are in that scenario. Joining me, Bob Clegg. Bob, you and I have talked a lot about this. Yeah. We've talked about this for months. Yep. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that you and I talked about a moment ago is exactly that, is why they did this interview. Explain. You have a political strategy firm. You do a lot of polling. You're involved in polling. You do fundraising. You have key connections in congressional members. So you have those three constituencies in the palm of your hands. Now, talk about those three constituencies as they apply to Joe Biden and tonight.
Well, tonight, I think on a kind of a basic level thing, I think they just wanted to prove that he could be semi-coherent in an interview. I mean, I really think it was that basic.
Do you really?
Oh, gosh, yes.
And when you say they, who's they? The White House comms?
No, the
re-election campaign? Or the party?
No, none of the above. I think the Biden family is the ones that are driving this agenda now. Jill, Hunter, his brothers. I mean, they're going to fight this thing, and that's just going to make it that much harder for the Democrat Party to deal with all of this. You can't get rid of Joe Biden with him kicking and screaming. I mean, you just can't. That optics of that would be devastating for the Democrat Party.
And we've established they can't go into the DNC with open delegates. They can't go in and have a true delegate fight, right?
They could.
Are you still a delegate on the Republican Party? Weren't you a delegate in the Republican Party?
I have in the past, yeah.
So you've been a delegate. So
yeah.
you on the Republican side.
Yeah.
So you understand what delegates go through.
Sure. But, I mean, if he withdraws, then his delegates are then freed. But if he doesn't withdraw, they aren't forced to vote for him. I mean, the party rules on the Democrat side are such that they say they have an obligation to vote for him that first ballot, but they aren't legally forced to. So, but you don't also want a floor battle to kick your nominee off. You can't do that. And it's too late. It's too late. If they're going to...
I don't think it's too late. I'm going to disagree with you. I still think he's not the nominee.
No. I'm saying if he refuses to go and that battle occurs in August at their convention, it's too late. They won't recover in time. I don't care who their nominee is. They will not recover in time. There would be absolute chaos, and the optics of that on the American electorate would be such that whoever they came up with, and it would have to be Harris, whoever they would come up with, and it would be Harris. And if there isn't Harris, that creates even bigger problems for him. So there are no good solutions for them with a fight on the floor to get rid of Joe Biden.
That's Bob Clegg, Republican strategist. I'm Westside Jeff in for Chris Krok. 800-288-9227. How do you feel about it? What do you think about this mess? This is as big of a mess in the world of politics we've seen in our lifetime. Ken from Arlington, thanks for listening. You're on with Westside Jeff and Bob Clegg. What are your thoughts on tonight?
Well, I didn't see anything on tonight, but I think that the meeting with the Democrat governors with Biden, I think they're grooming the vice president out of that. And if Joe gets elected, he's going to step aside from the 25th Amendment, and one of them are going to be president.
So your perspective is the Democratic governors and the president met to strategize a replacement plan, have Joe win the election, basically step down, turn it over to Kamala, and bring one of the other governors up, is what you're saying?
Not necessarily Kamala as the VP, as one of the Democrat governors as the VP. They're going to
kick her off the ballot.
Right.
Interesting. Who would you see stepping up for that?
Well, I don't follow the Democrat Party too much, but one of the Democrat governors that's most popular, and I think that's what's going to happen, is that Biden's going to get elected. He's going to pick the VP out of the group of the governors, and I don't think he's going to say Kamala as VP anymore.
Ken, thank you for listening. I appreciate you being a part of the show. We're going to Bob, you and I discuss his thoughts on this. I got to hit a break in a matter of minutes. On the other side of that, I want to respond, Ken, to what you had to say, because I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. I don't agree with it, but you make some interesting thoughts on that I want to tackle in about 4 minutes. That's Bob Clegg. I'm Westside Jeff in for Chris Krok. And thank you, Ken, for calling. If you want to weigh in, 800-288-9227. That's 800-288-WBAP. Westside Jeff in for Chris Krok on News Talk 820 WBAP, and now on FM at 93.3. Westside Jeff is the name in for Chris Krok. Chris is back on Monday night here in the chair in the studio. Tonight, it's me, Westside Jeff, along with Bob Clegg. Bob is a political strategist, handles a lot of Republican campaigns. Bob has a company that handles campaigns. He also a side company of fundraising and another one in polling, so he really knows what he's talking about and has some strong opinions about that. If you want to weigh in, I'd love to hear your perspective about the Stephanopoulos interview. What was your perspective of Stephanopoulos' interview this morning when you first heard about this, that he was going to be doing it? What were you expecting from Stephanopoulos? And did it meet your expectations? And now that audio is out, what's your perspective on the Stephanopoulos interview? Did it help Joe Biden's cause? Did it hurt Joe Biden's cause? And how do you feel? Does Joe step down? Do you think he steps down? And if he does, what does the Biden-Harris ticket look like moving forward? We just talked to Ken from Arlington. Ken, thank you for calling. Bob, Ken made an interesting point. I'll let you talk about it first. He said Ken's perspective was they had the Democratic governors meeting on Wednesday night in the White House with Joe Biden. The Democratic governors, a couple of them came out and spoke afterwards. And Ken, if I understood him right, said he thinks they're setting this up so that Biden can drop Kamala from the ticket and take a more popular Democratic governor and replace her and continue to run. You have been a delegate in the Republican Party and nominating presidents in the past. You've been an insider in this, so you know how that works. Talk about that. Can that be done? How is that done? Is it too late to be done?
Well, first off, Jeff, this is not a new idea. I mean, there was discussions in the White House last year about changing the vice president. Because Kamala Harris has had historically bad approval numbers as vice president, and the White House knows that. So
does she know that?
Oh, like any politician, they don't want to know that. If she knows it, she would never admit it. So they discussed this, and they didn't do it. And the reasons why they didn't do it are the reasons why they wouldn't do it now, even though, to answer your question, no, it's not too late. They could do it. He could make an announcement tomorrow, and they could then approve it in the convention next month in August. But the problem they have with her is that by kicking her off the ticket, they are going to disenfranchise and get a very critical part of their voter bloc mad at them, and that is African American women.
They cannot kick off a black woman from the ticket and replace her with anything but.
Yeah, well, and there aren't many African American women they can pick from, which is why she got it in the first place.
Yeah. Biden told us that 4 years ago.
Yes, he put himself into this box that ended up. He
specifically said that he was going to nominate a black woman.
Yes, and he put himself in that box, and she was the best of all of them, which tells you something about the pool that he had to pick from. But that's not the point. The point is, they won't do it for political reasons. And to be honest, I don't think it would make much, if any, difference on his poll numbers, whoever he would pick. So,
and your perspective all along is they know they get a problem. The Democratic Party, the DNC, the White House, legislatures, so Congress, and donors. All of the interested parties know there's a problem. They're all on DEFCON 5. I agree with that. Yeah. There's nobody saying anything different, publicly or behind the scenes.
But none of them have a solution to that problem.
I think you said a moment ago they're something about the panic factor.
Yeah. They're panicking, but they have no solution to their panic. And in the past they've panicked and they've had solutions. And we talked about the whole, Bernie Sanders 2020 thing where it started looking like Bernie Sanders was going to be their nominee. They panicked, but they solved that by getting Clyburn to back Biden in that South Carolina primary, and he won it and then went on to become the nominee. This time around, they don't have that kind of solution at all.
And this shows a clear division in the Democratic Party. And to your Bernie Sanders point, a couple points in that. Number one is I contend that the division, the problems they have today, the undertow of that started 4 years ago with Bernie Sanders. That was the undertow of this.
Yeah.
And that put Joe Biden in that position and puts him in a position where they are today.
Well, yeah. I mean, he had to go left when he became president to keep that part of the party happy. And he went so far left that he turned off the American electorate in the process, which is why he's so far behind.
And the second thing about Bernie Sanders, it's interesting how quiet he's been. I have not seen Bernie Sanders normally. Under normal conditions, I would expect to see a camera in front of Bernie Sanders and Bernie Sanders commenting about what's going on right now. He has been radio silent.
Yeah. Well, once again, what are you going to say? I mean, it's such a difficult situation. Nobody wants to insert themselves. because there's no political gain here for any of them, because it's such a mess. Everybody's staying away from it, except for the 4 congressmen that have said he should drop. 4 congressmen out of 213.
To date right now, and to your point, to date right now, we have 4 members of Congress, who have come out publicly and spoken against Biden running for that. I'll tell you a little more about those and who they are after the top of the hour news. That's coming up in about 3 minutes.